Hi, I'm Hannah, and today we're going to be talking about the education system in Denmark. Denmark is a small country just north of Germany, but below Norway and Sweden. Its Scandinavian people are known for being very happy. They were actually ranked the world's happiest population from 2012 to 2014. Now, I think it's highly likely that their education system has something to do with this. Beginning in primary and lower secondary education, Denmark has mandatory education for all students starting at age 6. This goes until age 16. 82% of students in this population go to public school or folkeskole, and that continues through year 10. But something interesting about this system is that no marks or grades are given until about 8th grade, what would be the equivalent of US 8th grade. Now, there is also a private school system which houses about 15% of the students, and it's run on a voucher system. This means that the parents get back their tax money that would have otherwise gone to public schools. The waiting lists are long for these private schools, but it is generally cheaper than many US private schools are. We're going to watch a little bit of a video here on
For 40 years, no Danish student under 13 has received a mark in school. Like elsewhere, kids at this public school in the centre of Copenhagen start their education at 6 or 7. From the beginning, in addition to maths and English, they're taught how to behave, how to gain confidence and how to make the right decision. Values considered important in Danish society and which are very difficult to assess academically.
There are a lot of things that kids have to learn that are difficult to put a number on. You can't put a number on being a good colleague. It's more about gaining the love of learning and being motivated. Motivation among the youngest isn't about getting a good mark, but focusing on what you're good at.
The Danish folkeskole is not an exam-orientated school. Students pass on to the next stage automatically, regardless of results. Although there are no marks until the 8th year, the pupils' progress is monitored through continuous assessment. Class participation, homework, oral and written assignments and practical work are all continually assessed.
They are more concerned about the students. They are concerned about the things they do wrong or where they are successful, etc. And for that, I think we have had a deeper, more profound evaluation using no marks than in a phase where you have marks.
The evaluations provide guidance for each student and allow teachers to plan out their education path. It also keeps parents informed on their child's progress. For the young learners, the monthly feedback from the teacher is very useful.
Maybe it helps a lot when the teacher explains this is wrong, because a mark is just a figure and it doesn't explain things clearly compared to someone speaking to you. It takes the pressure off, not having marks. So you think about how to use the time in the meantime, and you can achieve good marks when you start in the 8th grade.
I guess I'll work harder to get high marks, to be proud of myself.
a little bit about the way that the primary education works in Denmark. Now, moving on to their upper secondary education, which is ages 16 to 19. This is actually optional for students. They don't necessarily have to go here, but most students do because there are two programs available. There is the general education, which is more geared towards students who will be attending university afterwards, and there's also a vocational or technical education, which allows students to access straight into the labor market after upper secondary. Many of these vocational and technical education schools are very specialized. There are even some sports-specific academies. Now, as far as higher education goes, there are three types of schools: universities, university colleges, and academies of professional higher education. They are tuition-free to Danish students, which leads to a very highly educated population. And for living expenses, they are also given good grants and loans for just day-to-day living. As far as educational equity goes, Denmark is pretty average. They are smaller than average actually in the performance gap, which means that their lowest students aren't quite as low as other countries are, but their highest students aren't quite as high. This kind of shows that they're giving a pretty equitable education to most students. The performance gap between boys and girls is slightly larger than average. Boys do a little bit better in math than girls do at a higher rate than in other countries, and the socioeconomic gap is pretty average amongst other countries as well. Grade repetition is lower than average, which as shown in the video is because all students pass through their first 7 or 8 years without any marks, so how could they fail? Also, the immigrant gap is much larger than average, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. As far as educational access goes, Denmark has a system that is set up to support students from a very young age before they even are actually required to go to school. Everyone has guaranteed access to daycare, and 98% are enrolled in preschool or kindergarten, which is a very, very high rate comparatively. There are free public schools throughout into higher education, which leads to a more educated population, and students are required to attend until 16 years old, which is pretty normal. There are vocational schools as well for students who don't want to go to the higher education route, which allows more opportunities for students with different backgrounds, interests, and capabilities to continue their education. As far as educational diversity goes, Denmark has been a pretty Danish country for a very long time. It was mostly Scandinavian, mostly Danish population, but with the unrest in the Middle East right now, there has been a lot of Muslim immigrants coming in, and the bilingual or foreign child population has risen from only about 2,000 to 4,000 in 1970 to around 60,000 currently. So it's a huge transition for the Danish population to make. Also, around 10% of Danish schools are bilingual, meaning that they're actually trilingual. They call it bilingual, but they teach English as well as another language as well as Danish. Less than 50% of the bilingual children leave the primary schools with results that qualify them to proceed to higher education. This is the true tragedy of the Danish education system, is that they are clearly leaving their immigrant students behind, and they are not making the adaptations necessary to allow them to succeed in their education system. So overall, Denmark seems to have a pretty good grip on education, but they do have some areas that they need to work on. Here are my sources.